are to be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy, says Leviticus. And ever since those words have been written down, we've been arguing, discussing, and interpreting what it means to lead a holy life. It was never easy. From the earliest days of the nation of Israel, they struggled to understand the passage we heard today and that of the rest of the book of Leviticus. What did it mean to live these laws? How are we to put together a life which is sacred and recognizes the world as sacred, every bit of it? It was difficult. And so for 1,000 years, the religious leaders discussed and tried to understand what these things meant. And this brings us up to our gospel reading today. For the last several weeks, we've been hearing the Pharisees ask Jesus difficult questions about the law. You know, we've heard a couple stories. Last week, Father Masood preached on, and we heard the gospel about the Pharisees asking Jesus about the coin. Remember, they say, "Whose is this? To whom do you pay taxes, God or to Caesar?" And Jesus says, in the words of the King James Version, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and render unto God what is God's." And the next story is one that's familiar, but we haven't heard in church lately. It's interesting. It's about a woman who marries a man, and he dies. She marries his brother, and he dies. And the third brother, and he dies on until she's married 7 brothers, all of whom die. Right? And the Pharisees ask, so whose wife are you going to be when you get to heaven? Now, I'd pay to see that movie. But Jesus says, it's the wrong question. We don't believe in a God of the dead. Our God is the God of the living. And now we come to today's gospel. The Pharisees ask, what's the greatest commandment? Thinking again, they're going to play gotcha with Jesus. Right? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, it's certainly a wise saying, and maybe even a brilliant reinterpretation of what's been argued for 1,000 years. This reinterpretation of the rule book, which gave people so much trouble. But that's not primarily what's going on in today's gospel. It's not primarily what Jesus Christ is about. The importance of today's passage isn't that Jesus professes these words. It's that Jesus is these words. Jesus embodies the love that is love of God, love of ourselves, and love of neighbor. It completely changes the rule book. Leviticus says, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. The gospel today says, we are loved, because the Lord your God is love. This love that has no condition, that because of the cross has no end, that Jesus embodies in his person, in his ministry, in his life. And because Jesus does, we can embody it too.